scheduled 3 times. Yeah, so third time's the charm. The other reason this is a really big event is it's really hard to introduce a living legend like Don Swanson. This is absolutely incredible. On a personal note, Dr. Swanson has been responsible for helping to train a generation of rangers. We come in from all over. He takes us and sort of introduces us to the basics of Hawaiian volcanology. And what do you know, within a few weeks we sound like we know what we're talking about, and it's all because of him, so really impressive. Dr. Don Swanson, PhD from Johns Hopkins University, research geologist for USGS Geological Surveys, Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. His career spans well over 50 years. He's worked Mount St. Helens following the catastrophic eruption in 1980 and the lead up to that. In Hawaii, he's been instrumental in recognizing the explosive past of Kilauea and showing Kilauea's eruptive cycle styles in cyclic time frames that last centuries. In 2016, he receives the Distinguished Geological Career Award. And I love this citation by Mike Poland, a colleague. He said, if you looked up field volcanologist in a dictionary, you will probably find a photo of Don Swanson.
How do you know you've achieved the pinnacle? Hello. How do you know its battery's gone? How do you know you've achieved the pinnacle of your career? When they publish the Geological Society of America Field Volcanology, a tribute to the distinguished career of Don Swanson. After 20 years with the Park Service, this is my distinguished. Ladies and gentlemen, Don Swanson.
Well, thank you very much, Dee, for that maybe over the top introduction, but I do appreciate it. I really enjoyed working with park people as well as USGS people during my years in Hawaii, starting in November of 1967, off and on ever since that time. So today what I want to do is to talk about the history and the legacy of what I call HVO on the Bluff, which ends in 2018, so I'm not going to be talking about anything that's happened since 2018. The observatory was built on top of the bluff, what we call a bluff. And how old is that bluff? The bluff was formed about 500 years ago when the caldera collapsed, and the bluff is the margin of the biggest part of that collapse. The building is on the on top of the bluff were occupied by the USGS starting for 70 years, from 1948 to 2018. The first building was originally a park building that was occupied from 1948 to 1986, and then from 86 to 2018, we were mainly in the building with the tower on the top, sort of iconic tower. The image on the left is taken in 1951 of the original HVO on the bluff. The middle image, or the right-hand image, shows the addition that was made in 1958. Somehow that has come to be called the annex, but when in the old days it used to be called the chemistry building. My office was in the far corner of that building. And then the way it now stands, although it won't be standing for very much longer, is shown here. The 1958 wing is obvious. The 1986 building is the one with the tower on the top. And then the original building, which we occupied until 1986, morphed into the Jagger Museum. And in fact, the sales area of the Jagger Museum was about where the shop was in the old HVO that I'll be showing you a bit of. This image shows sort of a passage of old and new. The older person is Roy Finch, a seismologist who was a member of a very small cadre of scientists at HVO in 1924 and for the years thereafter and before, for that matter. And the tall man is Gordon MacDonald, who was the principal geologist of the observatory when it was established in 1948 on the Bluff. Mac was a very distinguished scientist, well known and well respected in the community in Hawaii. The first test of HVO on the Bluff was the 1950 eruption of Mauna Loa, and here Mac is advising residents as to what to do and what not to do. The next big test of the observatory was in 1955 when lava flow, shown in the blue in this map. The red is the 2018, but the blue is the 1955. Erupted in lower Puna and destroyed a lot of habitations. These images show Mac interacting with civil defense people during the 1955 eruption, and on the right, he's advising in the construction of a barrier for lava flows. The barrier, unfortunately, didn't work. These images show a new kid on the block. A very important figure, as I'll develop the talk. A man named Jerry Eaton, fresh out of UC Berkeley. This was his first eruption, and interacting with civil defense people and showing the civil defense administrator how seismometers work. He was a supreme scientist and also a novel instrumentalist and a monitoring inventor, really quite a talented person. He had help in the shop, which was, as I said, where the sales area was in Jagger. He had a wonderful machinist, Bert Lux, who manufactured a lot of the equipment that Jerry requested. And helping Bert was John Forbes. Many of you may know John from the past, and John not only helped Bert in the instrument making, but was also an all-around go-to person at HVO. Under Jerry's direction, Bert made discarded artillery shell casings that he collected from Kilauea into tilt pots, which were used for in developing a new tilt meter system at Kilauea. The image below shows Willie Kinoshita reading the level of water in one of these artillery shell casings that has been modified by Bert. The pots sat at 3 pots at the corners of triangles that were connected by water hoses, and as one corner of the triangle went up or down relative to the others, the water level in the tilt pots changed. This was a very finicky system, but it worked. Most of the work had to be done at night because you didn't want sun heating water in the water tubes. But it was remarkable how Jerry figured out how to do this, and with Bert's help did it.
One of the dimmer systems back here.
Jerry Eaton also vastly upgraded the seismic coverage of Kilauea, which was almost non-existent before 1955.
It doesn't
and he brought it up to a level that was
over on that side.
equivalent of and even better than some of the seismic networks elsewhere in the world. The seismic upgrades and the tilt network were completed just in time to capture the build-up to the 1959 eruption in Kilauea. It's remarkable how these things came together. The seismicity, as measured by Jerry's equipment, increased dramatically before the eruption, and the tilt, the inflation measured by the tilt stations, peaked abruptly a month before the eruption began. Three months before the eruption, the seismic network detected deep earthquakes, 55-kilometer deep earthquakes, well north of Volcano Village. The first and only time that such earthquakes have been recognized in the area. So again, Jerry's development of the seismic network proved very prescient. And I have to show 3 slides of the Kilauea eruption because that's such a famous one, but I'm not going to dwell on it. But it did produce a lava lake that I'll get back to in a couple slides. But after that eruption, in Lower Puna, the Kapoho area, an eruption broke out. That destroyed most of the village of Kapoho, the school. Again, lava diversion barriers were attempted, but didn't work. Well, Jerry Eaton and his outstanding geochemist colleague, Jack Murata, put 2 and 2 together. They thought that the Kilauea eruption in 1959 and the Kapoho eruption in early 1960 were part of the same eruption process. And they published a pace-setting article, How Volcanoes Grow, in Science magazine, that outlined the plumbing system of the volcano that they thought at the time permitted this kind of activity at the summit, and then tens of kilometers away a month or 2 later. This paper was the Bible for a decade or 2 to come. The lava lake that was formed in Kilauea was a natural laboratory for studying how basaltic lava cools and crystallizes. So Don Richter, on the staff of HVO, started a drilling project through the crust of the lake to collect samples of molten rock beneath the crust and to measure temperatures in order to track the cooling of the lake. He was joined soon after this work started by Jim Moore, who went on to be the person who discovered the giant landslides, seafloor landslides surrounding the Hawaiian Islands. 2 more lava lakes formed, and they were simpler and easier to study. One in Aloha crater in 1963 that Dallas Peck, in the lower left, honcho, and the other was in Makopui crater in 1965 that Tom Wright took charge of. And the aims in both of these lava lakes was to drill, recover samples, measure temperatures, and further define how basaltic lava cools at low pressures. The Makopui eruption, I'm going to dwell on a bit because it was really spectacular. You could drive to Makopui in those days, and so the filling of the crater was observed, and once it was done, there was a lava lake present beneath the road, but 700 feet beneath the road. And so in order to get down to the surface of the lake, you had to use a fixed rope across the upper 10 or 20 meters, and then scramble down the tailor slope 700 feet down to the surface of the lake. A tramway was established on the rim of the crater, and the heavy equipment was helicoptered in, but the tramway was used to lower and haul out samples and lighter weight material. This was the brainchild of Bill Francis of the observatory staff. What he did for the tramway was to pull a Jeep up, jacked up the rear end of the Jeep, took off one of the wheels and put a big pulley on the wheel. And this, depending upon whether the engine was going forward or backward, lowered or raised the tram. It was marvelous ingenuity that Bill showed. And the drilling took place over from 1965 until the summer of 1968. I saw it in '68. There was a lot of experimental work that was done in these hot holes in the lava lake, including the bald fellow on the right photograph, Herb Shaw, developed a means of measuring the viscosity of lava down in the hole by putting a viscometer on the end of along the drill string. Anyway, all of this information proved vital toward understanding the cooling and crystallization history of Makapui. Samples were sent in thin sections of rocks around the world and were used in classrooms for decades to come. In the mid-1960s, there was a lot of technological development of improving instrumentation for measuring how the ground changes shape, in our case, the volcanoes. Improved commercially available instruments enabled faster and more accurate readings, and labor-intensive but very precise leveling networks were established. This was used by Dick Fisk and Willie Kinoshita to track the swelling of the area around Mauna before it erupted in November of 1967. You can see in the map how centers, the numbers, migrated east and west, as the center of inflation migrated. All these centers were defined by the results of leveling. Dick told me that he and his colleagues would arrive at the observatory in the morning after having worked hard the day before, and Howard Powers, the scientist in charge, would look out the window and say, "Looks like a good day for leveling." And so down they went, and as a result, they had this very detailed picture of how the swelling took place. Dick also developed concepts about how the south flank of Kilauea and the Kauai fault system deformed. Leveling continued at HVO until around 2010 or a little bit before. It was labor intensive, but oh, what beautiful data the leveling obtained. The swelling of Mauna that Dick tracked culminated in an eruption in November of 1967. People flocked to the scene. Here they are on the rim of the crater. Maybe some of you were there, looking down at the lava lake. Tom Wright in the upper right is measuring the depth to the lake surface with Reggie Okamura in the white coat and Howard Powers, the scientist in charge, with the radio behind. This was the first eruption that I saw. I was called over to help in the first couple of weeks of the eruption. The electronic distance surveying was just starting in the early 1960s. The leveling gave you vertical changes, but the distance surveying could be used to give horizontal changes. AGA Corporation in Sweden developed a portable geodometer that Dave Hill and Dick Fisk on the HVO staff used to establish a network of horizontal measured distances at Kilauea's summit to track widening and contraction of the summit area. August salesman Jim Carter had used the geometer to measure during the development of the BART tunnel under San Francisco Bay. And he taught Dave and Dick how to use the equipment and taught me when I came along later. These measurements supplemented and extended the leveling to give us a three-dimensional picture of how the volcano was deforming. First time that it ever been possible. The instrument was not very powerful, however, and required a lot of nighttime work in order to get reflections of the geometer beam off of the reflectors at the end of the lines. This map, I just show it to show you the kind of information excuse me, that we could obtain by using the geometer data. This shows contraction of the summit following or during the February 1969 eruption of the East Rift. A more powerful laser geometer was purchased in 1969 for $25,000, $1969. I was responsible for that. I went to the salesman's office in Sacramento and was blown away by what it could do. HBO purchased what I think was only the 7th instrument off the production line. Using this very powerful instrument, we were able to occupy all the previous triangulation survey stations on Kilauea. Triangulation is a method whereby distances can be calculated, but quite inexactly. And we were able to occupy all of the benchmarks in these triangulation network using the trilateration, using the geometer to demonstrate that all of Kilauea, and particularly the south flank, was moving. The first time this was done. Now, while this was taking place, we had an eruption going on. Not only one, but four. There was, after the summit eruption in Mauna, there were 3 smaller eruptions on the East Rift Zone, and then the Mauna Loa eruption, which lasted for about 4 years, and at the time was the longest lasting rift eruption at Kilauea, though of course later dwarfed it. The slide on the left, taken by Jeffrey Judd, but I was with Jeffrey at the time, shows lava falls into Aloha crater higher and wider than American Falls at Niagara. That's one of the most spectacular sights that I've seen in my career. And then from the top of Hulu, you could see these giant fountains from Mauna Loa in the summer of 1969. It's another spectacular view. Geometer surveys of the network showed how all of Kilauea deformed, changed shape during the magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Kalapana on November 29th of 1975. The map shows displacement vectors determined by geometer work. And the photographs show changes that took place as a result of the subsidence of the coastline. About 5 meters subsided at Halape. 2 people and many horses were killed by the tsunami on that dreadful day. A weakness of geometer work to measure the horizontal changes in shape of the volcano was that you had to see from one end of the line to the next one. And in a heavily forested area, that can be pretty tough. So, but in the mid-1980s, GPS measurements from satellites took over. And with GPS, you only need to see a particular receiver on a point. You don't need to see anything else. And so Paul Delaney and Ostramiclius took over the GPS operation, which supplanted the geometer work in the late 1980s and into the 1990s and 2000s. Then in the early 2000s, so another satellite technique called INSAR, interferometric synthetic aperture radar, was developed, and this provides a synoptic view of any place where the satellites pass twice. It differs the views that the satellites obtain, and you don't need any targets for these receivers or anything. And this has become the wave of the present, certainly, as well as the future. Unfortunately, the data are rather difficult for a non-specialist to interpret, but we're working at it. Mike Poland and Ingrid Johansson are big on the INSAR as well as GPS. The left image shows a simple little GPS receiver used for campaign GPS surveys. The right image is an INSAR interferogram showing faulting that took place in the Kauai fault system in May of 2012. The break is pretty obvious in the color fringes of the interferogram. All of these developments in deformation monitoring again appeared during a hectic time of nearly continuous eruption of Kilauea. It's incredible when you think about all these things going on at the same time. The Pu'u'o'o eruption from 1983 to 2018 was the elephant in the room. It eventually overshadowed everything else at HVO on the bluff, except for one thing. The construction of the original Okamura building, the one with the tower on the top. That's what everybody thinks of now as being the observatory. The building was finished in late 1986 and was moved into and then was dedicated in January of 1987 with a large crowd in attendance. All of the previous scientists in charge at HVO on the bluff were present except for Howard Powers, who was ill. Reggie Okamura and his wife Jane attended. Reggie was, at the time, the deputy scientist in charge at the observatory, but he had been essentially all things to all people. He'd been the main driller during the Lava Lake studies, the main calculator for the leveling and geometry work, and sort of the overseer for the technical support staff at HVO. Reggie died soon after he retired in 1999, and in 2002, the building was given his name, the original Okamura building, and Senator Inouye gave a very moving eulogy to Reggie. From the building, in part because of the new facility, but also because the science was advancing rapidly, various different models of the plumbing system of the volcano were being calculated. And this figure by Mike Poland shows Jerry Eaton's model in the upper left. The upper right is a model that Mike Ryan developed in 1988, and then Mike himself developed one in 2015. These models are difficult to convey the importance of to the public, but they are wonderful guides for thinking about the science for the observatory staff. Watch it telling me it's time to do something with mouse. The observatory on the bluff also provided the headquarters for major mapping projects, geologic mapping projects that were undertaken in a modern era with vastly improved geochemical support, dating by radiocarbon dating, finally by AMS radiocarbon dating. Paleomagnetic directions could be obtained, and some really nice geologic maps have been prepared for the summit area, Kilauea, by Tina Neal and Jack Lockwood, and Frank Truesdale is preparing a number of maps on Mauna Loa, and this one is one with Jack. During this time, too, the nature of staff organization changed, and I'm not going to dwell on that too long. I'm not going to give you any org charts. But previously, things did change. Previously, everybody did everything at the observatory. You might be leveling one day, and you might be helping to lay out some seismic cable the next, and then leveling the third. But of course, that couldn't go on as the science became more technical. We had outstanding field workers, Norris, Arnold, Will, Kira, Marie, and Pauline. The latter three were office workers, but helped in the field as well. This was part of the culture of the time. Marie, incidentally, some of you may know, she married, left the observatory, and she and her husband bought the upper store in Volcano. So Marie is the one that you buy orchids from the Volcano now. Many more that I can't mention here. Now the tasks have become much more specialized, of course, and so people were divided into teams, and the support staff remained local and pretty much carried on from year to year. The research staff, which used to rotate, lost that ability, and so now it's uncommon that scientists will rotate in and out. It does happen, and it's not frowned upon, but it isn't required as it used to be. Pu'u'o eruption. Longest lasting eruption since the 15th century on the Rift Zone. It occurred during about half the time that the HVO on the bluff existed, and all of the time that the original Okabura building existed on the bluff. Many aspects of this eruption can be highlighted, and you can write books about them. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to look at three. One is the growth, destruction, and danger of lava deltas, formed lava goes in the ocean. The second is the concept of flow inflation that took the world by storm. And then the close working relationship that was developed between civil defense and HVO on the bluff. First, the formation of lava deltas was outlined in a really nice fact sheet by Jenda Johnson, who was a volunteer at the observatory, one of the staff members. And what she showed pictorially and in words is that as lava enters the ocean, it builds what seems to be a stable surface on a very unstable base. That base can fail, carrying people on the delta away with them, and unfortunately that happened. I envision in the future, when we get another eruption like Pu'u'o that lasts for years to decades and lava flows pour frequently into the ocean, that this fact sheet will be retrieved and used to educate people not to go on lava deltas. The concept of lava flow inflation was developed by Ken Hahn and Jim Kawa at HVO and published in a GSA paper. See how the flow is thickening? You don't see much lava. The lava is entering the flow upstream and lifting up the crust on the lava flow. This explains a lot of the morphology of the Pahoa-like flows that we see, and has obvious ramifications for hazard analysis when lava flows are being emplaced. Probably the most important outgrowth of the Pu'u'o'o time was the development of the lava flow hazard zone map for the island, and this was done primarily by Christina Helliker and Tom Wright in the early 1990s. Today, this has societal consequences because insurance companies either don't insure or charge very high rates for people living in hazard zones 1 and 2. So this map directly impacts people on the island society tremendously. As Kalapana was overrun during the Pu'u'o'o eruption, HVO on the Bluff worked in the field 24/7 with advising CD where lava might go, how quickly it might move, when buildings might need to be evacuated. HVO scientists saw firsthand the anguish that the lava flow has caused the residents, and this has been perpetuated ever since that time among successive staff members. And there was a lot more interest paid by the media as well as civil defense during this time. There are Austin Nicholas being interviewed, Christina Helliker on the phone. Over the years, this broadened interaction with the media has really, I think, worked to HVO and the public's benefit. Witness the Bahala crisis in 2014 that Steve Brantley oversaw, and the large crowds that didn't have to lasso them to come to the meeting room in Bahala to hear what was happening. Now, Mauna had a lava lake in it for the final 10 years of the Pu'u'o'o eruption from 2008 to 2018. This is the first time that in recorded history that the summit and the rift zone have been erupting at the same time. And this provided a chance to study the hydraulic connection between the two, and Matt Patrick took the lead on that. Cameras developed and installed at Pu'u'o'o and at on the rim of Halima'u were used to document the collapse of overhanging walls of the crater into the lava lake, generating explosions. This happened time after time after time, and the cameras really documented this in a beautiful fashion. And then came 2018, and this is where I'm going to be stopping here, but here at the summit, many of you probably attended the meetings that we had in the evenings once a week, and because of the earthquakes that were being generated by the collapse of part of the caldera floor. It was an eventful time, to be sure. My office, which was already a disaster area, was made more so. And luckily, this was in the summertime, and so UHH opened up classrooms for waifs from HVO on the Bluff, and this really further cemented the working relationships between the university and HVO, and that was the end of HVO. HVO on the Bluff, I should say. Now there's some other more general random comments that I'd like to make. Sort of skipping around. Starting in 1972, it was possible to calculate the magma supply rate to Kilauea, how much magma is coming in per unit time to the volcano. And it turns out over years, it's homing in around 10, 11, 12 million cubic meters per month. Something more than a million cubic or a million dump trucks per month it would take to haul away what Kilauea is being supplied. Currently, many people are peripherally at least interested in how the magma supply rate changes over time, either changing in melting rates in the mantle or changes in shallow storage or a combination of both. And this will go on for years to come, I think. The weekly newspaper column was started by Dave Clegg as more or less a labor of love, and it really took off. Since that time, more than 1,600 columns have been written by a variety of staff members. It appears on the HVERI website, of course in the paper, becomes more widely distributed. The column meets with public approval, and I think it really helps to spread the word about the volcanoes and about what HVERI is doing. Field work has found that Kilauea has powerful explosions, clustering into periods lasting several centuries each. For the past 2,500 years, the volcano has actually been in a period of dominantly explosive activity about 60% of the time. For the past 200 years, we've been in a Goldilocks period when mainly lava flows have erupted. In the future, this will change. And so this has led to a lot of speculation, a lot of study, a lot of interpretation as to what is the cause of this cyclicity. And I'm sure this will continue for decades to come. And Mauna Loa is explosive too, as Frank Truesdale could well tell you. HVERI on the Bluff was a nurturing ground for 3 men who became high-ranking administrators. Dallas Peck, who was the scientist who dealt with the 1963 Lava Lake and Aloha crater, later became director of the USGS, 1981 to 1993. Gordy Yeaton was a short-term scientist in charge at HVERI. He then left to become USGS director. He then resigned to become the president of Iowa State University. And he finally became the director of the Lamont Geophysical Observatory's Earth Observatory. And my dear friend Dick Fisk resigned from the USGS after returning to Washington. And he became the director of the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History. Those of you who have been there probably remember the dinosaur skeleton on the floor. Dick was in charge of all of that. And he's now in retirement on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. HVERI on the Bluff was the only observatory in the country until 1980. And so what this meant is that when Mount St. Helens was restless and then went into eruption, it was staffed mainly by HVERI alumni. The initial staff of the Cascades Volcano Observatory, which was developed in Vancouver, Washington as a result of the St. Helens eruption, was staffed largely, though not entirely, but largely by HVERI alums. And HVERI on the Bluff has helped newer American observatories elsewhere in times of need. HVERI on the Bluff helped UHH and continues to help in their study of active volcanoes with the the classes that they hold for international students. HVO scientists have given lectures and led field trips for these groups. And Bob Decker, who was at the time HBO scientist in charge, really conceived the notion and was very happy to see it brought to fruition. I've neglected to highlight many things in this talk. One is the notable advances in seismology that have been made at HBO on the Bluff. I've neglected this because it's not my field at all. But I do want to mention two heroes, in my estimation, who were at HBO, two seismologists, Bob Koyanagi, who really took over for Jerry Eaton, and then Paul Akubo, who took over for Bob. These scientists not only oversaw the cataloging of the earthquakes that are happening day after day after day, and need to be on top of that, but they also interpreted these data in terms of models of the volcano. This is good science, and as a geologist, I really appreciate that interpretation, but I also can't leave out the tremendous efforts that the cataloging by people like Jennifer Nakata put into keeping the seismic data up to snuff. VOG was recognized and characterized at HBO on the Bluff, starting with the Pu'u'o'o eruption. Paul Greenland and later Jeff Sutton and Tamar Elias pioneered a way to measure SO2 by driving underneath the SO2 plume with a spectrometer. Currently there's a continuous daytime network that is operated in conjunction with the University of Mauna Loa to do this. And of course, HBO works closely, especially tomorrow, with the estate. Measurements of carbon dioxide at Kilauea are very important. They show that most of the carbon dioxide is emitted at the summit of the volcano, not along the rift zone. In other words, there's very little CO2 that came out during the Pu'u'o'o eruption, but a lot was coming out at the summit. That indicates that the magma that's entering the rift zone first rises to a level beneath the summit at which CO2 can escape in great volume before heading down the rift zone. And this is a fundamental importance for developing plummet models. Over the past 20 years, remarkable improvements in telemetry have been made at HBO. You know, you have instruments spread all over the island. They're acquiring data. How do you get the data back to HBO? This is where the telemeter instrumentation comes in. George Kojima took over for Jerry, and then Ken from him, and now Kevin is in charge of really a never-ending troubleshooting and remarkably successful means of transporting data back to the summit. The website has grown tremendously over the years, not just because the websites in general have, but because of the input from Janet Babb and before her, Steve Brantley. So that the HBO website, I think, is a paradigm of excellence now. Currently, Katie Mulliken is in charge of that. And under the loving guidance of Jane Takahashi, the library at HBO on the Bluff in the original Lokomura building became the best source of written information about Hawaiian volcanoes anywhere. Anywhere. Every published paper was copied and filed for staff use, and most books were likewise available. The public could make use of the library. Maybe some of you here in the room did that. Upon her retirement, we christened the library the Jane Takahashi Library, And I hope that a library in her name can be established at HVO in town. The staff, these staff photographs, 70, 91, 2018, show the increasing staff size, which reflects the increasing complexity of our work, and is probably, and is, I think, larger now than it was even in 2018. Now I'd like to spend 3 slides presenting my prejudices, in part, about what the impact of removal of HVO on the bluff will be. There are, to be sure, many positive advantages to having HVO in town. More space, better labs, proximity to students, close to facility fans, so forth. As I see it, the main loss from dismantling the buildings on the bluff is the immediacy and the related inspiration that results from having the observatory on the bluff at the summit of one of Earth's most active volcanoes. This is important to some of us, maybe many of us, and I'm one. I get inspiration from seeing things and walking on them and feeling them. And I get creativity, I hope at least, from that inspiration. And that's vital in scientific research. Now this depends, of course, on the individual, and I'm the first to admit that. There are doubtless many people, perhaps most at the observatory now, younger people, that can get as much of a feeling of inspiration from constructing models on their computer and looking at chemical data and so forth. That's fine. I don't mean to denigrate that at all. It's just a very different means of obtaining inspiration. That wouldn't work for me, and maybe I'm a lost cause. Relocation to HVO removes the observatory from the community it most closely and most often serves. Kilauea and Mauna Loa are big volcanoes, but the volcano community is nearest the most active part of the most active volcano. This will be the first time since 1912, when Jagger started the observatory, that the summit of Kilauea lacks a resident volcano observatory and a resident volcanologist. To be sure, there are people living up here, but they'll be commuting to Hilo every day. It will take hard work, I think, to maintain the relationship, the culture with the community. To maintain that relationship from its relatively detached location in Hilo. Not impossible. I'm not saying that it's impossible. But people are going to have to work very hard to overcome the outer sight, outer mind syndrome. I personally think the observatory should have remained on the bluff. And I am not alone in this feeling, I know that. "2018 was an excuse, not a compelling reason to abandon the site. After all, the 1958 building, the chemistry building, the annex, survived just fine. Why not build the observatory there? Other non-scientific, subjective issues came to play, however, and they won the day. However, many, and perhaps most of the HVO staff would probably disagree with me. I'm sure that they're comfortable with abandonment of the site. But the deal is done. The milk has been spilled, so to speak. There's nothing more we can do about it. We have to move on. So let's move on. The election was over and we lost, but we have to live in it. I'm relieved, frankly, to be retired because I don't have to endure what for me would have been a heart-wrenching transfer from the bluff to Hilo. But if I were a young scientist early in my career, I think I would be really pumped to be in Hilo and a new facility, new perhaps guidance, and the chance to build something new rather than simply standing on the shoulders of something I went before. Time will tell. In any case, I think HVO in town builds on a truly remarkable 70-year legacy of HVO on the bluff. I hope I've made that point today. And it's a legacy for which all the staff members of HVO on the bluff can take pride. And so, with tears of sadness and perhaps some of anticipation, I repeat the famous words translated from the French, who gave these words during the transition from one monarch to another. The king is dead. Long live the king. Finally, the last slide. Let's give the new king a name. On the bluff, we had the Reginald Okamura building. The new building at HVO, I think, should be named for a distinguished HVO alum. I suggest that the Hilo building be named for the scientists who really kick-started both the research and the monitoring efforts of HVO on the bluff during the 1950s, and that, I think, is Jerry P. Eaton. He vastly improved the seismic network, invented and put into use the first tilt meter system at Kilauea, and developed the first overarching plumbing model for the volcano. Any one of these feats would have been a scientific coup, but all of them together, amazing. And so, let us hail the Jerry P. Eaton building of the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory in Hilo. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. The one topic I won't discuss is what led to the removal of the buildings. I was not party to the negotiations that led to that. I know something about them, but I don't want to say anything publicly. Privately is another matter. I've said things privately to people, but not publicly. But anything else that I talked about, feel free to ask me a question. Yeah.
I understand there's going to be a field station up here.
There will be a field station. I think the use of that field station is not particularly clear. It's a place to come in out of the rain. But there will be no offices there, no meeting rooms, no nothing. It won't be an observatory. That's being constructed over near the ball field at KMC. I don't think there's going to be much equipment there at all that I know of. I think it's mainly a gathering place and an assembly place for field forays, I believe. But I haven't. I'm really not up to speed on that.
In the back, Don, right over there.
Oh, okay.
If you were at the beginning of your career, what would you be most excited about? Like things that are happening, what would you be most excited about?
At volcanoes or elsewhere?
Here.
At volcanoes, because I have lots of interests. Well, I think I can't help but say that I would like to understand far better than we do now what causes Kilauea to explode and enter into these periods dominated by explosive activity. I was responsible for developing that idea, and we don't understand it very well, and we need a lot more information, so that's probably what I would do. Now, if you gave me a choice of, other than volcanoes, I might be a historian. I really enjoy history and what it can tell us, and that's been kind of my approach actually in geology and in volcanology here at Kilauea. Many things that I've done looked at the past of Kilauea and trying to understand what happened and how it might happen again.
Let's do one more question, Don.
Yeah.
Do we have anything from the live stream?
Well, I got a question for you. You came to Mount St. Helens at the start of that crisis in 1980. How did your work at Kilauea help you tackle that new dynamic situation? Very different volcano. There must have been some.
Well, actually, what we did at the monitoring early on at St. Helens in late March, April, May, up to May 18th, was patterned after what we have been doing here at Kilauea. We had a geometer. We measured distances to targets on the volcano. We measured tilt in a parking lot adjacent to the bulge on the summit. By a means I didn't get into here, but one that we had used at HVO. So the HVO training, in terms of how to monitor, was really helpful. And then I think there were three of us from HBO, more, but three people who were there most often, Jim Moore, Peter Littman, and I. We came with a mindset of how to think about volcanoes, volcanic activity that I'm sure had subtle influences on what we were doing at the time.
All right.
Wait. Yeah.